All right, so one of the most anticipated movies of this year, MaXXXine, that rounds off this trilogy, a very unexpected trilogy. And when X came out, we would just think we were getting one film, but shocking, they announced a prequel that they had shot during X, and then we're giving this a whole trilogy. So that was pretty damn surprising. And as well as both X and Pearl were received, it was a welcomed one. And so while there was a very short wait for Pearl to come out, from I think March to September, if memory serves, this was almost 2 years after Pearl. So we did have to wait a little bit for this one. So the anticipation was definitely growing. Now, the first two were not the big, box office juggernauts one might think. They only made maybe like $10 to $15 million a piece, which was actually pretty surprising to me when I went and looked. Just because I thought maybe these made a little bit more money with how much attention MaXXXine is getting. Almost like those are like some big named films. But I guess within the horror community they are, but they're promoting it like they're, this is a big thing, and to us horror fans, it is.
Yeah, absolutely, it is.
But I don't know. The marketing makes it seem like it's trying to go for a bigger audience, which that's what marketing does. So this one, of course, is the follow-up to X, with Pearl being a prequel, and we follow MaXXXine into the 1980s. We're here in 1985, Hollywood. MaXXXine is a porn star, and she wants to make it in the movies. She's tired of the porn industry, and she wants to live the good life. And, she thinks she's a star, and she will not accept a life she does not deserve.
That's right.
So she gets an audition for a slasher sequel called The Puritan 2. And unfortunately, your past always seems to come back to haunt you.
Sure does.
Now, Pearl plays out like this 1950s, or, that one's set before that, but this is kind of the era they're going for, is that like Technicolor movie. And the 70s plays into X, like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. And this one is going for an 80s slasher vibe mixed with the giallos of the 70s in Italian cinema. So this was one as I had said, we're both heavily looking forward to, and as a huge fan of both X and Pearl, I was really looking forward to this one. And was this the perfect end to the MaXXXine X Pearl trilogy? It was definitely satisfying on paper, right? Like, I think that it all makes perfect sense. And it closes out all of the obvious, like, pieces that I had expected. I wasn't wrong about pretty much anything that I had guessed. We were going into it. But the film does feel shockingly tame for me. And that really, really surprised me. Hence the shockingly part. And, I was kind of sitting there the whole time, just kind of shocked that this film wasn't going harder, and that I have a lot to say about this one. So I'm going to let you go before I spend way too much time talking.
I definitely really, really enjoyed this film. I think it's, as far as like an ending to the trilogy, I do think that it ties in the previous two films pretty perfectly. At least of my first impression coming out of the theater, it's not my favorite of the three, for sure. Like, I still think that Pearl is probably the best of all of them, for me personally. But I think that's something that could maybe change, like, if I, upon subsequent rewatchings of it. I think it is so much bigger. It feels like it's such a bigger film. There's so much more happening. And also there's just more people, but I don't know. There's definitely a lot to talk about, for sure. I mean, I enjoyed it. I think it's a great film. I think that if you loved, Pearl or X, like, you should obviously go see this.
What about for people who did not like them? Is this going to win them over?
I don't think so. I don't think this does anything that's wildly different than the first two that would make you like this one.
Yeah.
I think it falls pretty much in line as far as, like, the character, obviously, as far as MaXXXine goes, and, like, the gore and the stuff that we get is all similar to the first two, but as you said, just definitely more tamed down from maybe what we were expecting, and especially with, like, the sleazy 80s vibe that's being emulated, as well as, and I don't want to say anything that you're gonna say, but, like, there's definitely a giallo vibe that's like really heavy, and I don't remember if that was part of the trailer. I don't remember if we got any of the black gloves or anything, but
we did. Very briefly.
There's a really heavy giallo vibe in, like, the first half of the film, and a lot of giallos they're known for being pretty violent and, like, a lot of nudity and kind of trashy in some ways, and so this definitely wasn't as trashy and violent as you would expect it to be, considering what it was emulating. Yeah,
definitely not. And because Mia Goth is in this, and because the first film featured pornographic material so heavily, you definitely were expecting this one to really lean into it now that she's, like, a big porn star. Now, it also felt like they were making a point to not show nudity, right? Like, especially with her. There's, like, a few scenes where she was naked, and they purposely did, like, these very respectful, like, close-up shots where we weren't seeing, and I was like really kind of surprised by that. And they even go back to one of those scenes later and purposely cut around that, and I was like, wow, really? Like, that's shocking to me. And as far as the kills go, so because this is like a slasher, I actually thought the slasher stuff is the weakest part of this film. I didn't like much of it at all. There's a couple things, right? There's an attack. I won't say where it is, but that's the only slashing part of it that felt genuinely like a slasher. But there's other deaths in the film, and they mostly happen off screen. And when I say off screen, I don't mean the kills. I mean the entire event, where we just find the bodies for the most part. We see, like, a little snippet of something that happened. But most of the, like, slasher stuff in this movie that's done by the slasher, which, I'm sorry, it's not going to be hard to guess who that is. It's all just kind of, like, there and gone.
Yeah.
And that really bummed me out. Yeah. Because the slasher aspect of this is what I was kind of almost most looking forward to. As much as I love Mia Goth as MaXXXine, and I wanted to spend time with her, and boy do we. I mean, the title of the movie is MaXXXine, so we're going to spend the majority of the time with the, titular character here. But because this, because the first film is this, and the second film is this, and this one was the slasher, and that there was such an emphasis on the slashing going on, and because I started this channel with Slasher Sunday, and slashers are, like, my favorite subgenre of horror. I was like, yes, even though the first film, X, is, for all intents and purposes, also a slasher.
Yeah.
And we get a good amount of slashing in that. But the slashing in that is better than it is here. And because I thought that was more of a character study of Pearl, I thought that we were going to really lean into the slashing aspects here, and that things were going to get very violent, and we were going to see some super inventive kills. So if you were going into this expecting this to be like Thanksgiving, but with, like, MaXXXine, and really to ramp up those, like, violent kills that you would see in 80s horror films, that's just shockingly absent from this movie.
It feels like kind of also what you were saying about, like, the nudity and everything. it felt like they were taking like a really critical, I don't even know if it's critical, but it's very much like the cutthroatness of Hollywood. That I feel like is what's really focused on in the movie, is like, you know, in order to be a star you have to be willing to do anything, and like everybody in Hollywood has like blood on their hands or is like sleazy or, you know, whatever in some way. And that felt like the focus to me more, which, you know, you would think kind of goes hand in hand also with like sexualizing especially like young women in Hollywood, because there's so many stories of course of, you know, women that had to sleep with directors or producers or whoever to get roles and stuff. So I definitely thought there was going to be more of that too, especially considering MaXXXine's like history as a porn star.
Sure. Well, they also set up scenes where it's very much warranted. Like it's not like, because if they would have approached it this way, right? Like MaXXXine is like, I'm done with porn. Yeah. I don't want to do that life anymore. I'm out, right? And she'd like quit her job as a porn actress and was like, I'm going straight. I want to take this seriously. I'm a serious actress now, and I'm not gonna, you know, bear all anymore. Like, I'm done with that. I'm trying to remove myself. It's kind of like the girl in Slumber Party Massacre 2 who was a Playboy playmate, and she was like, I'm not gonna do nudity in this movie because I'm trying to take it seriously, right? And there's plenty of other examples of that, but that's just the first one that comes to my mind because that movie fucking rules. And so if they would have had that approach to it, I would have been like, okay. And that's kind of the vibe I was going with in this, where it was like MaXXXine is trying to get herself away from it, and you got so much of it in X. It's like, well, it's there if you want it, but it's like she still works in peep shows. She still works at like a titty bar doing porn in the back, and there's, you know what I mean? So like, and then there's a scene where she's literally asked to show her tits, and they like do not show it, and I'm like, are you guys purposely not showing them?
I don't think that.
So it feels very watered down, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case, because I think MaXXXine, like, she does use her sexuality for power and attention.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's still very much part of her character in this movie. So it is, you know, I personally, like, it's not a big deal to me if I see nudity or not, but as far as, like, the tone of the movie goes, it was unexpected to not get the nudity that I think would match the tone. And I don't know, I mean, that's fine. That's maybe something Mia Goth like didn't want to do, and you know, that's like that. Of course, there's no criticisms about that. But just from like a story like perspective, it is a little odd. The other thing too, because we are trying to avoid spoilers, but in the trailer, there's also like, this is happening at the same time that the Night Stalker is terrorizing LA. Yeah. And I think that part of, I didn't like that was happening. I mean, I don't like that it happened in real life, of course. But I feel like having that happening simultaneous to everything else that's going on fictionally with MaXXXine, I don't know. I think it kind of, I don't want to say muddied anything, but it just gave me a weird, I don't know that I like its inclusion. I don't really know how to like verbalize that better. I'd have to think about it more, but
it's supposed to put us in the time and space, right? It's supposed to have us buying into what was going on at that time with the satanic panic. Yeah. Right? And for them to kind of stage those murders like that, it's almost like Richard Ramirez was giving them some kind of inspiration for what ended up happening, because these guys, and I can't say anything more to that effect, but I think because of what it ends up being, it's as I said, I can't say
just kind of setting up the setting and the time. I guess that's fair.
It didn't bother me.
One thing that I really loved, and I think Ty West is obviously great at doing this, but as far as like the vibe of the era, I think that's captured like really perfectly in this. The style's on point. Yeah, the style's great. There's a lot of really cool shots. The music is fantastic. I think it's very fitting, and it's just a very aesthetically pleasing movie. Like I think all three of them are, but this one especially being in the 80s. it's just done very well. And yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a movie that like I'm happy with it and I enjoyed it, but and this is maybe an instance where expectations kind of got the better of me, because I was definitely very much looking forward to it and expecting it to be like, you know, potentially top film of the year for me. And it's not that. It's definitely in the top films for sure, but it's not like number one. And as I already said, it's not even number one for me of the trilogy.
No.
At least right now. That can always change. But
it's my least favorite of the three.
Yeah, that's how I felt too.
Yeah.
And it does kind of, it feels weird to say that too, because it's the most different of all of them, you know? So it's like, I don't want to be that person that's like, I just want another movie that's the same as the first two, but
oh, God, no.
And it's not that, but it is very different from Pearl and X. And
I think so outside of the slasher angle, another issue I have with the film is that because MaXXXine is so disconnected from everything around her and all she cares about is being a star, there's these people dying around her, and while we do set up some kind of maybe friendship, we just don't get enough time. And I think that's probably my main issue outside of like the slasher angle didn't really work, which is such a bummer.
yeah.
Is that everything is just so
Yeah.
like rushed with
That's
all
good,
of the characters.
That's a good,
like
yeah,
there's a
way
lot
to
of
say it.
there's a lot of like characters that are introduced in this. And some of them are bigger names, like Sophie Thatcher.
Absolutely.
And Halsey, and you know, there's a bunch of these characters that are in here, and they're just like chalked up to cameos.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, I just feel like if we could have like cut down the cast a little bit, or maybe focused a little bit more, because there's just things that are like they're there and then they're gone, and then I don't know what much they add to this.
You know,
right?
In a way,
For her character.
I like what you said about them being kind of like cameos, because another feeling that I got with this film is that kind of all of the characters are very stereotypical, very much like out of a movie.
Yeah, very one-dimensional.
But it has a very kind of a meta feel in that sense.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if that's intentional, because it's like you have these recognizable faces, but they're playing these parts that are so like they're caricatures of like that role, like, and one-dimensional is a good way to describe it. So it's kind of like they're all these like background supporting characters in MaXXXine's life, which would make sense for how she views herself, and you know, obviously how the audience views her as well.
I also don't love how this movie wraps itself up. I thought it was way too clean. And the way that they kind of double take, and it all kind of just amounts to the same thing, kind of just made me go, I don't really understand the point of that. So it was just kind of a head scratcher, because I thought we were going one way. I'd leaned over and was like, okay, I think this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And it was like revealed to be true, but then it kind of just like takes that away and just kind of does it again. And I was like, I don't understand. So like that's, I don't know, man. So I'll tell you this. You're there for MaXXXine.
Yeah.
And MaXXXine is great, right? So like everything with MaXXXine, you know, and she doesn't get nude. Oh well, you know, I've seen Mia Goth fucking naked in 15 movies now. So like I don't really care. Like, would I have liked to see it? Sure. But it's not necessary. I don't care. That doesn't bring my... It's the tameness that brought this experience down. But I will say this. Final point. If this came out before the other two, I don't think this one would be making people yearning for, like, X and Pearl. If they were like, oh, we have 2 prequels to this, where we want to explore what happened to MaXXXine before this, and then what happened to the character that she killed before that. I think people would be like, okay, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'll check it out. You know, it's to where X left you like, oh my God, I want so much more. And Pearl left me like, yes, I want to see the end of this. And this one left me with kind of like, okay, that all makes sense. It's exactly what I thought, but in a way that was like satisfying and yet still somewhat unsatisfying.
Yeah.
Which was super weird. And I think on subsequent viewings, I'll just accept everything that's going on here, and I think we'll have a very good, well-rounded trilogy. That's one of the best trilogies ever. Now, I had claimed this was going to be like potentially the greatest horror trilogy of all time, and as of right now, I don't know if it landed that. Now, what does beat this currently? I don't know. I'd have to really sit down and think about it as like a true rounded trilogy that's really just a trilogy, and that's all it ever was. I don't know, but as of right now, I am a bit disappointed in this. I don't love it for sure, but I do love MaXXXine, and that's what I'm there for. But everything else around her felt stifled a bit, and I'm still trying to process that and work it all out. And maybe my expectations were too high, but I usually keep those in check.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've really enjoyed it. I love MaXXXine, and I love a lot of elements of the movie for sure. So of course you should watch it if you've seen the first two. Of course, like go see it and decide for yourself how you feel. But it's definitely one that I want to rewatch and just see if anything changes on another viewing, because I do like what I was saying about these like caricatures and like kind of the meta-ness of it all. I do think that might be more in line with what they were going for, like the more I think about it, and I like that angle. So like the next time we watch it, I'm gonna have that kind of in my head, and I'll just be interested to see if that changes things for me. But I mean, everyone does a great job. Mia Goth, of course, is fantastic, and she really just is in that role. And it's I mean, you know,
we have such big names in here too, and
really big names.
I don't think that like I like them, right? And as you said, it's almost as if when she gets to Hollywood, everyone becomes phony. Everyone becomes this one-dimensional caricature. Like we've got Kevin Bacon playing this PI, and he's very one-dimensional, very one-note throughout. He's great. And I did like him. He's probably my second favorite performance in the film. Giancarlo Esposito from Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, plays her agent. He's good, but very one note. Very the same. Elizabeth Debicki, who plays a character named Elizabeth, who's the director of The Puritan 2. They're all caricatures.
Like, that's the stereotype that you would think of in Hollywood. So that's why I'm like, I feel like that is very relevant to what's happening, and it does make me wonder about some things. And even all of the like satanic panic like stuff that's going on is very I don't want to say generic, but it kind of is like generic. It's very like stereotypical is maybe a better word for it.
I think also like the reveal of the killer, it's almost as if Ty was like so like sure that his audience was as smart as they were and was like guessed this forever ago like I did. It's like there's like no reveal to it. Like this is a slasher where typically the reveal is like the oh shit moment, right? Like take the Scream movies, obviously, for instance. The reveal is like everything. It's like, who's the killer? I want to know, right? This is like so like okay.
It makes perfect sense for MaXXXine,
but it's
and that's
the way it's revealed.
That's what I mean.
Does it like?
No, it doesn't have a shock factor.
If you saw this and only this, and even if you only saw X and Pearl one time each, I feel like people would kind of just be sitting there going.
Oh, I definitely don't think you should watch this movie without having at least seen X. I think that watching this as a standalone film would give you like so much less of an enjoyment. And that's kind of a shame because I think that you can watch Pearl and X. You could watch them either way. You could watch Pearl first and then X, or X and then Pearl, and I think that they both are fantastic on their own, and then when you watch the other film, like, that complements them really well. But with this one, I don't think you can watch it without having seen at least X.
Yeah.
Because, I just think it would be, like, okay, cool, like, that's that. So
that is that.
Yeah.
So those are our thoughts. Definitely looking forward to knowing what everyone thought.
Yeah,
and,
I'm really curious as to what people are going to be saying about this.
From what I've seen, most people are like in love with it. Think it's like the perfect end of this.
That's wonderful then.
I have one person who's more like me. Lee from Drum Dums. He's more like with me, where he's like, it's like a 3.5 out of 5. I don't know if I'm that low, but I am. This is definitely a bit disappointing for sure. But I had said the film that will be number one for me, and I will be shocked otherwise, is Long Legs, which is next week.
We have really high expectations for that one. So
I had high expectations for this one.
Yeah, definitely.
And they weren't they weren't completely met, but it's not like this is a shit movie. I'm talking about it, so that's the problem. Expectations also, messes with our review to a degree, because I'm sitting here shitting on this like it's bad. I'm not. I'm picking apart the things about it that kept it from being that perfect movie that I had hoped it was going to be, right? But it's still a good movie that I'm talking about like it's a bad movie. But if I went into this thing, it was a bad movie, and it was on the level this one was, I would be sitting here saying almost nothing but praise about it. So you see how it alters the conversation when your expectations alter your review. There's no doubt about it, and I don't know how anyone can do it any differently.
Yeah.
And that's all I can say about it. But this is a long enough spoiler-free discussion.
I know.
So we're gonna move on.
All right.
So that's that.
That's that.
Yep. Definitely one of the disappointments of the year, but not a major one.
Definitely not major at all. Yeah, still a fantastic film. For
I'm
me,
not
at
a
least.
fantastic.
I think it's a really good film.
I think it's quite good.
I think it's really, really good.
I think it's quite good, but I definitely
I think
do
it's
not
like a
think
4.
It's
I think it's a 4 out of 5.
That's probably where I'm at.
Whereas like X and Pearl are both 5 out of 5s.
That's probably where I'm at.
It's a 4 out of 5. So that's a great film.
It's not a.
That's a great film.
Yeah. Anyway, that's that. All right. Bye.
Bye.